Welcome to the Research Works podcast, brought to you in association with Curtin University and the Healthy Strides Foundation. Your hosts are Dr. Dana Poole and Dr. Ashley Thornton, and together we will interview world-leading researchers in the area of child health to support your practice in being more evidence-based.
The team at the Research Works podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which we live and work. We pay our respects to all First Nations peoples, elders past and present, and would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we record this podcast each week, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We recognise their continued connection to this beautiful budja we call home. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Research Works podcast.
Yes, welcome back. We are fast approaching the end of another year, which is a bit frightening.
Just slightly frightening, isn't it? Gosh, it's just looming.
But what a year it's been, Dana.
I know, I love it. I feel like I've learnt so much. I say that every single week. Mm-hmm. I've learnt so much.
It's true though.
Yeah, we have.
We have.
Once you start doing your reflections and you think about how we're going to wrap it all up, there's so much information. It's amazing.
We're very privileged.
We are. We really, really are.
Yeah. And that's no exception this week. We have not one but two special guests in the studio with us today. One of our guests has been on the show before, and after her visit we knew how important it was to warm up your feet before going to bed. I put my socks on every night.
Thank you.
Yep. Welcome back to the one and only Dr. Sue McCabe. Hi, Sue.
Hi.
Sue.
Hello.
And Sue, as some of you will recall from season 1, is an incredible occupational therapist. And since finishing her PhD, Sue's been working clinically to support sleep in children with neuromotor and developmental conditions with a 24-hour and an ICF perspective. In addition to her clinical work, she's providing clinical support to clinicians, a great example of knowledge translation and how powerful that is. So, yes, thank you for joining us again, Sue. We're so excited that you've come back.
Love it.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good sign, isn't it, to be asked back?
Well, it's a good sign to be asked back, but it's a really good sign that you agreed to come back.
Yeah, so that's true. That's a good perspective, Ash.
And we're really excited that you have brought along a fellow researcher today who you've been working with for a number of years and happens to be visiting us all the way from France. So thank you for joining us and welcome Professor Veronique Bach.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Veronique is a professor of physiology and vice president of the research in health at the University of Picardie-Jules Verne in Amiens, France, which is about 100 kilometres north of Paris, after I did a little Google and worked out where my geography a little bit. Yeah. Professor Bach has over 30 years of experience researching the interaction between sleep and thermoregulation in neonates. Her research has shown that thermoregulation is not depressed during active sleep in neonates, in contrast to what is observed during REM sleep in human adults, and can therefore not be directly at the origin of sudden infant death syndrome. The purpose of her studies is to analyse how sleep is altered when sleeping in a non-thermoneutral environment and how this environment can be modified in order to improve sleep. And I'm really excited to cover this today because I think, again, there'll be some really practical takeaways from our conversation.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I think after you came on the show last time, Sue, obviously you had a big impact on how we view sleep and thermoregulation and things that we could take home. The number of people I speak to now that go, we just put socks on, we don't let our kids run around bare feet because their feet are too cold. There's just some nice takeaways. So there's going to be even more of a deep dive.
For sure.
Yep.
And so that's the formal getting to know you.
Good.
Thank you both. But as you know, we like an informal getting to know you as well. And so I have a little getting to know you question today. And that question is, it's a would you rather question. And I thought we'd make it sleep related.
Nice.
So as you're falling asleep at night, would you rather listen to a fan all night or a radio stuck on the news station?
Sue, how about you go first?
For me, it is a no-brainer, absolutely a fan, especially because of the news we have these days.
Oh, that is true.
Can you imagine falling asleep to that kind of news and how that would seep into your brain at night time?
I love fans in any case. Fan, everything about a fan, the sound, but also the sort of feel.
Yeah.
And also it's very evocative of feeling calm, feeling relaxed, the fan going tick, tick, tick. Yeah.
You're putting me to sleep.
It's lovely. Lovely.
I'm with you. There's no, my husband curses me because no matter the temperature throughout the year, I have the fan on every night. Yeah.
I do. Tell him that you are being very scientific.
Thank you. I will pass that information on. I might need to get it in writing.
Yes, we have a professor. She will write it for you.
Tell us why. Oh, yeah, we need to talk about that.
I love the feeling of that. I know it's not fresh air, but I love the feeling of air and movement on my face. I rug up everywhere else, but I like to feel the air on my face while I'm sleeping, and I love the noise.
Yeah, really, really good. Veronique, what about you?
Well, I sleep in with radio, not with news, because effectively news are not very nice. No, but with podcasts, maybe yours.
Oh,
yes. Next time it will be yours.
Yes, I have one we can recommend.
But the fact is that it would be better with a fan. But I don't like having air on my face.
Yeah.
And in Amiens, it's not so hot. So
True.
That's fair
sleeping
enough.
with a fan would be very exotic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true.
I like the idea of a podcast for sleep.
I do too. That's probably what I would say. Like radio, I like hearing people talking if they have the right tone of voice.
Yes.
You hear some people's tone of voice and it's not sleep inducing at all. But I like the idea of a fan because it feels like you're on holiday. Like I don't have the fan on at home because I don't have one in our room, but I like having the window open. I just like the breeze. And then if you're in a tropical island, there's always a fan and you can kind of imagine what that would be like. And I like the idea of that.
Yeah.
So I think I'll go fan as well. Yeah. Good question. I like it. I like how sleep related.
Well, yes, I'm trying my best.
Yeah, that was really nice. Really nice and thematic. Well, on that note, let's talk more about sleep.
It helps with the segues as well.
Good segue. Okay, so today we'll be talking more broadly about thermoregulation in wakefulness and sleep in humans, a bit of a deep dive into human physiology. So we increasingly understand that there's a relationship between sleep, body temperature regulation, and patterns of skin temperature. The functional consequences of this relationship is that sleep disturbances can be observed with thermoregulatory changes. So knowing that there is this relationship, there are a number of clinical implications that can be influenced by therapists and the environment. And so some of the considerations include how thermoregulatory responses can be modified by sleep stages, how the skin and internal body temperatures vary according to the sleep-wake cycle, and how manipulating thermal parameters can influence sleep quantity and structure. So throughout the discussion today, we'll be referring to several papers that bring this knowledge of physiology into a pediatric clinical setting. And for this reason, it is so wonderful to have the duo of Veronique and Sue to walk us through this.
Agreed.
It's a good one.
Not one expert brain, but two.
Yep. Get your brain on.
Yes. So let's take this deep dive into sleep and thermoregulation now. And we'll start really broadly, Veronique and Sue. Can you talk to us about how temperature affects our bodily functions?
Our body needs to be at homeothermia. So everything is done in order to keep homeothermia. That is to say, to keep your internal body temperature between 36.5 and 37.5. If you are faced to an environment which is too cold or too warm, you will develop responses in order to keep your body temperatures at this level. And in this environments, these responses are costful.
Yeah.
And so you need energy to do this. And this energy won't be available for anything else. Yeah. So, for example, in babies, if they sleep in non-thermoneutral environment, that is to say too cold or too warm, they will have less energy to grow up, for example. The increase of their body weight will be reduced with the time. So it is better to remain in an environment which is less costful regarding energy. But on the other side, you also need to be sometimes challenged, faced to warm or too hot or cold environment in order to help you to develop these responses. So there's a right middle to find.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in order for your body to understand how to regulate, it needs to be exposed to at least some changes or variability in temperature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That does make sense, doesn't it? Because otherwise you're always in this very clinical, neutral environment. And if anything were to happen, your body wouldn't know how to cope with it.
Yeah.
And I imagine that you want your body to be more efficient with coping with the changes. How does that work in our body?
It is, you have different steps and different ways to improve it.
Yeah.
First, the response can be solicited more rapidly, and the increase of the response can be also greater when you are used to be challenged to such environment. For example, if you stay for adults, if you are sleeping in a cool environment or in a warm environment during several days, then your sweating response, for example, in a warm environment, will be better and better every day. And this will help you to maintain more easily your thermoregulation and your homeothermia.
Right. I have as you described that, I remember one of my high school teachers saying, you can all train yourselves to fall asleep with just one sheet. If you just did that for a week, you'll be fine and you will cope through winter. And I was like, I'm not doing that. That's going to be too difficult. But I remember seeing some of my friends, at home, my mum would often give me like a quilt. It would be quite heavy and quite warm. And then I would, because I was from Canada, so it was very cold. When we came to Australia, people had really thin sheets even through winter, and they were still okay because they didn't have the thick sheets that you have in Canada. So they would be used to that, whereas I couldn't cope with it because I was always so used to having something. So your body does adapt. It can change.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
But your sleep doesn't adapt usually. So it's strange to mention that thermoregulation can adapt, but sleep doesn't follow this adaptation.
Yes. Okay, that's really interesting. So why is that? Is that quite a complicated concept? Why is there not that relationship between?
This has never been studied.
Okay.
But we have observed in adults and also in neonates that during a several days long exposure, your thermoregulation will adapt. You will be more and more efficient from one day to the other one, but your sleep will still remain altered. We don't know why.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting area to try.
Yes, but it's not a good news.
No.
I
guess clinically, what does this mean, Sue? Like if we know that, what does that mean for us in practical terms?
I think it means that we need to be aware of and respond to the challenges of different thermal environments for the children we work with, but also know that different children will have different levels of ability to respond to those challenges as they are falling asleep and during sleep. And we could ask Veronique to explain very well the different physiological responses that occur when if our body if we are too hot or we're too cold. Even a brand new baby, and Veronique is the person who's researched and reported this, a neonate, a brand new neonate already has physiological adaptive responses to help regulate their temperature, automatic responses. For us, though, some of those responses involve body movement. So for those of us who work with children who may have impairment of their body movement, that's another important clinical thing to be aware of, that even as a neonate, some of the babies we work with may not have those automatic physiological responses.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to talk about that actually, just about the neonates.
Yeah, and it's so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, so Veronique, tell us more about that. This is something I've not looked into before, and I find it very fascinating that you've looked into sleep and thermoregulation in neonates.
Okay, so thermoregulatory zone is the zone in which you don't have to elicit any physiological response against cold or against warm. Okay. So that is the definition. It's quite similar to thermal comfort. So I feel good, I don't feel quite cold, or I don't feel warm, but it's not exactly the same, but usually it's supposed to be almost similar. Around this zone, you have a cold zone in which you will elicit different responses, either behavioral responses or physiological responses. If you look at the behavioral responses, our responses would to take a pullover, a cover, and so on. Or you switch on the heating and so on. If you look at the physiological responses, one of them also is to have a fetal position in order to limit the body surface which is exposed to heat exchanges and to limit the heat losses. And regarding the physiological responses, very different according to the fact we are adults or infants. In adults, we have shivering, which will increase the body heat production through activation of the muscles. This is not very frequent in neonates because it is supposed to be more non-shivering thermogenesis, which is elicited, and which is more important, is more efficient than shivering itself. So it's more interesting for babies because babies have a greater ratio surface per body mass. And since this ratio is more important, they are more subjected to higher and more rapid heat exchanges.
I see.
So in face-to-face, it's more interesting to have non-shivering thermogenesis, which is more efficient.
Right.
But it cannot be maintained over a long time because the energy stores of babies are quite small, and it's too dangerous for the body, for the general functioning of the body, and for the body growth also, and also for health, of course. So this is on the cold side of thermoregulation, thermoneutrality, and between thermoneutrality and the cold side, you have physiological responses which are quite thin, such as vasoconstriction. That is to say that all the vessels of the skin will vasoconstrict. This will reduce the temperature of the skin, and this will make to reduce the heat exchanges with the environment, which is cooler, because the heat exchanges are functions of the difference between air temperature and skin temperature. So the higher difference is, the more are the exchanges. Okay. So if you have cooler skin temperatures, it will be more narrow from the air temperature, and so you will reduce your heat losses. So this is quite efficient. It is present also in preterm neonates, even they are very preterm. In 1.5 kilogram neonates, you can have such responses already. So quite amazing. This is on the cold side of thermoneutrality. On the warm side, you have, if you look at the behavioral responses, it will be a spread eagle position, where on the reverse side, you will try to increase the body surface which is exposed. You will have a vasodilation in order to increase the skin temperature and therefore to increase the body heat losses. And after this, you will have increased sweating. And this sweating is present in adults, but also in neonates. But when we get older, the sweating response gets less and less efficient.
Interesting. Can I ask, Veronique, what about changes in respiratory function when in neonates, if they are too hot or too cold? Is that something that...
it's in cool environment, the breathing frequency is more homogeneous.
Homogeneous, yeah.
In the warm side, it has been more studied on the warm side. The breathing frequency increases, and it's very unstable.
Yeah.
And at the end, you can have breathing apneas.
Right.
And pauses. This is a problem, for example, for neonates which are in closed incubators.
Yes.
Because in incubators, the temperature is not always at the right level. It's hard to know what is the good level for one neonate. And sometimes it's too hot, or it's too unstable because you have opened the doors, make a care, and then when you close the door, there is an overshoot of temperature inside the incubator. As this overshoot can lead to apneas or to periodic breathing. This is not very nice in neonates.
No. And it sounds like it's a very sensitive or fragile kind of balance that you're trying to, particularly for the neonates, that you're trying to strike there, not wanting to disrupt those temperatures too much because of the...
For the neonates in incubator, it's quite easy. The best way is to look at they keep homeothermia in a thermoregulatory environment. So all heat energy can be devoted to being alive, being safe, good health condition, and growing up.
Yes, yeah. I find it really interesting when you were talking particularly about the, I suppose, for want of a better term, the postural changes that you make in response to your environment being too hot or too cold. Because I'm just thinking that, anecdotally at least, that seems to be something that you do maintain to some degree from, infancy through to adulthood. I think about when I'm cold, my natural reaction is to kind of hunch over and bring your hands in and bring your feet up. And then when you are, those 40-degree summer nights and you're trying to sleep, you do kind of end up all spread out to just try and, cool down however you can. I find it, so interesting that we're trying to change our core temperature, but all of those processes seem to happen with our peripheral system, don't they?
Yeah. And I think when you describe it in that way, I was thinking of how you then relate to the kids that we do work with, because we have the freedom of movement to be able to have those responses. So what happens when you are a neonate, you don't have all those voluntary movements yet as well to actually make those responses, or you have a movement disorder where you don't have the option to extend your arms and cool down versus bring them close to you, I find that really interesting. I know, Sue, that's probably something that you work with a lot and sort of appreciate.
Very much. And in fact, that's why the information that Veronique has for us about thermoregulation, thermal comfort, thermal responses, both behavioural as well as at that more automatic physiological responses, which can also be behaviour but not conscious, not purposeful behaviour. It's so important that Veronique's information can guide our actions, and our actions can be, we can look at the child in relation to their capacity to move and change, but also how we help to manage I think probably the most important for us is how can we manage the environment of the sleeping child so that those challenges are not there. Veronique and I were talking yesterday about it seems the biggest challenge for the sleeping children is when they get too hot. I think we were talking yesterday when they get very hot. It can be,
except in preterm neonates, but the fact is, children, yes, you're right.
It seems to be very challenging, and we were talking about how I said, well, how come in research, if we're looking at research into SIDS or other conditions, does it mean it's worse in summer than in winter? But then we realise that in winter, often we wrap up our children and we can actually overheat them in a cold environment as much as they can become too hot in a hot environment.
Yes.
So it's not just, it's about seasons, it's about changes in our whole climate, but it's also about how can we look at managing the ambient temperature and airflow in the bedroom, but more specifically even in the bed with clothing, with bedding, with fans, with devices that can really help the child have exactly the right microclimate for sleep, regardless of the challenges they have to their movement and their responses.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I guess, how do we do that? I think with when we talk about ambient air temperature, I don't have a thermostat at home, but I think some people do because they're conscious of the environment they're setting up. What is an ideal ambient air temperature to sleep in? Is there such thing?
It has been studied in the 70s by Alain Musée in Strasbourg in France. And he measured sleep structures and sleep duration in different air conditions. It was done on young men. And he observed that the wakefulness during sleep was less released during when the air temperature was at 16 or 19 in the room.
Yeah, okay.
And the temperature inside the bed at this time is of almost 30.
Right.
This should be the best condition to sleep.
Oh, wow. Okay. So on top of that then, I remember the conversation we had with Sue last year, which we keep talking about the socks. And, and we know that there is, if we reduce the core body temperature and increase the temperature in the distal, and that obviously is something that, makes sense now after we spoke about it, if we go, in terms of what we can then do for our children. But what I'm really curious about from there is the process to get to sleep. So we know there's that temperature change that goes to sleep. And how does that relate to circadian rhythms and REM? A lot of people have watches, and so people all know about, are they sleeping well? Do they get into REM sleep? And I'm not entirely sure we all know what that means.
Yes.
But we have them all in our watches and we're like, oh yeah, I got good REM.
We know it's important, but we don't necessarily know why it's important, do we?
Right. And I thought, well, if it's not too much to talk about the physiology and how we understand how that works. So I know I've asked it very broadly, so I'm basically giving you free rein to help us understand it. But, their terminology now that's in pop culture, people talk about REM, people talk about circadian rhythms, people talk about melatonin now as well. How does that all relate to some of the work that you've been doing and understanding how we can maximize good sleep?
To sleep in, there are different steps before sleeping in. With increase in the vasodilation especially in the distal part of the body, so the feet, the legs, and the hands.
Yes.
This has a result to increase the body heat losses towards the environment and to let the core body temperature to decrease slowly. And it has been supposed and suggested, even demonstrated, that the sleep onset occurs during the decreasing phase of the core body temperature.
Okay.
But in fact, the promoting signal is not the decreasing phase of core temperature, but the increasing skin distal temperature.
Okay.
So the more you vasodilate on the distal part of your body, the more rapidly you will sleep in.
Right.
So that's the good general meaning.
Right, okay.
But of course, there's also a circadian rhythm.
Yes.
And if you avoid someone to sleep, then he will still keep a body temperature rhythm. So it's not sleep that gives the circadian rhythm.
Right.
Circadian rhythm exists even if you don't sleep.
Right.
But at a lesser extent.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And
what role does melatonin play in this puzzle?
So melatonin has been demonstrated to induce sleep onset.
Okay.
But in fact, if you look this from a thermoregulatory point of view, you see that it's also related with vasodilation. And the general meaning is that all the events that helps you to vasodilate on the distal part, and melatonin do, all these events will help you to sleep in. So, for example, if you lay down in the evening in front of your TV, this will help you to vasodilate.
Changing posture.
Yes.
So not so much the TV.
Yes.
as such as changing your posture, relaxing, being calm.
Dim light, but also melatonin, ingestion of melatonin will help.
Yes.
Hypnotics also functions via vasodilation.
Okay.
If you eat a spicy meal, it will help you. If you have a warm bath, just in the evening, not before, just before going to bed, but some hours before, it will help you because it will increase your internal temperature, and then the temperature will decrease, and this will help you to sleep in. But if you do this, if you do your bath too late in the evening, then it will delay your sleep onset because your body temperature is too high. So just have the bath or the warm conditions several hours before sleep.
That's really interesting because I think bringing it back to, say, children and a nighttime routine that they might have, often they'll have their dinner and then they're really messy. So they'll, be put in, they'll have a bath and then after the bath, it's bedtime. But perhaps, actually having that bath a little bit earlier gives them then a couple of hours for those processes to start working and actually make the onset of sleep.
Yes.
It's a fine balance.
Yes.
A lot of the families I see, sometimes the bath is too far soon, too early.
Yep.
So even maybe 2 or 3 hours is too long because the effects kind of wear off.
Yeah.
The children get excited, they play, they rev up again. So
running around on the cold floors.
So I think when Veronique says several hours, I think you mean maybe 1 or 2 hours before sleep time.
Okay.
Not too far soon.
Yes.
Kind of a bit close to sleep.
Yeah.
But again, we need to think about with a bath. For some children, a bath can be calming, relaxing, a lovely part of that whole cascade of events that bring that distal vasodilation.
Yeah.
But we also know some children having a bath can be exciting. They get revved up. And when we get excited and we get revved up, we will get vasoconstriction. It's just that physiological response.
Right.
Or we have some children who just don't want to get out of the bath and they have a massive tantrum. So again, you can picture that red face.
Or the bath might be quite a distressing experience for them.
Yeah. So there are many, this is what I love so much about sleep and thermoregulation. It's a beautiful, like a beautiful synchrony of everything that makes a difference. So,
But I like how what you've said there, Veronique, and what you said there, Sue, about that routine, what we're keeping in mind, I guess what I'm really realizing is the importance of the temperature changes that are the onset. And if you can keep that in mind, then you can analyze what's happening for each child as they're about to go to sleep. And then you can think about whether there is this opportunity to support that temperature change. Yeah. I feel like that's a good way for us to sort of look at the scenario that's very individual. And when you talked about dim light, I really related to that because I've been to some lectures before and the lighting is very dim and I don't think it's very good, or it's very blue light. Can you tell me about the blue light part? Because I've been to lectures where the lights in the background are blue and doesn't matter what I do, I want to sleep. Tell me there's a reason for that.
Besides the content.
Yeah, besides the content. Let's not talk about that.
Just before, I would like to add something concerning the sleep routine.
Sure.
This is very important because this routine will help you to have this vasodilation at regular, every day, at the same time. This will be very helpful to reduce sleep onset. For example, if someone is used to sleep every time at the same hour, then every time he will have this vegetative sleep preparedness, 100 minutes before sleep onset.
I see.
But if at this time you go to bed later,
Yes.
your sleep preparedness has already begun, and then it's not good.
Yeah.
So it's better to have this regular sleep routine.
So
Very
it's-
important.
I was
We're probably
going
gonna
to
ask
say
the
the same thing. So is that why if I have one really late night and my sleep patterns are not regular, that's why I can have difficulty sleeping for the
Yes.
following week?
Yes, that's right.
Right.
and
Okay, that makes
and
sense.
introducing a routine can, I suppose my question is, how adaptable are circadian rhythms and those kind of hormonal changes in response to establishing a routine? Like, is establishing a routine for a family, does that kind of drive changes to circadian rhythms and hormone changes in melatonin and things like that then make sleep onset easier?
Yes, yes, it does. Your routine will help you to that all body circadian rhythm will be set
Yeah.
at the good time.
Yeah.
This will be very helpful.
Mm.
Yeah.
I guess that's jet lag, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense now. It's not that you've just been traveling and you're really tired through all that. Everything is
Out of whack.
Out of whack.
Is out of
yeah.
whack. Yeah.
And that's another reason it's so amazing, because when we think of our body's rhythms and our readiness for sleep, it's not just our brain or our vasodilation. Every cell in our body, every system has its own circadian patterns of day and night function.
Yeah.
Especially for a lot of the children we work with, the gut in particular can be perhaps the biggest challenge for their ability to get to sleep and stay to sleep. And that we need to think about the timing and the rhythms and the patterns of food and drink intake and gut function.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's linked also into thermoregulation. You know, we know how if someone is, say, constipated, that affects autonomic nervous system function. And so it's all intricately linked. So when we're thinking about thermoregulation, we are thinking almost about everything, about play, about how we think, are we calm and relaxed, but also the timing of the food, how much we have, timing of our, all that can make a difference.
So I see why you look at that, we said in your bio, it's that 24-hour approach. You're looking across that 24 hours and that ICF perspective and looking at all the pieces and mapping it out. I know we've sat many times at a cafe where we map it all out and you can see how one thing might influence the other because you can't improve sleep by just changing one thing. You might if you're really lucky, but there might be a lot of things that are related. Yeah. So Veronique, I need to go back to the light because I need to make sure I understand that part. So tell me, there is science behind that?
So the fact is that blue light will postpone the peak of melatonin, and this will postpone the sleep onset time. So you should avoid blue light.
If you
during
want to
the
fall
evening.
asleep,
If I want to fall asleep.
avoid blue light.
Yeah. Right. Okay. That's very interesting.
And that's why
I
there's
fall
all the
asleep with it.
glasses around now that filter out
filter.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
light.
Yeah.
Ah,
Or
okay.
screens.
For screens.
For
Yes,
screens.
also.
Yeah.
And that's why if you have trouble with your circadian patterns, you can actually have glasses to wear in the morning that have blue light into your eyes, blue-green light, which kind of sets your body clock to say, okay, this is the morning blue light, stop melatonin, because the whole clock of melatonin is 24 hours as well.
Oh, gosh.
Amazing.
But Dana,
I was falling asleep with content then.
well,
Because
also
it was blue light.
it is blue light, but remember there's a whole lot of factors. It is blue light, but also if it's very dim, then dim will help you be more sleepy, even in the blue light.
Yep.
But then there's also the sleep drive.
Yep.
So for people who are very, very busy, often we it's a bit personal, but often people who are very busy maybe always have not quite enough sleep. It means there is always this high level of sleep drive lurking in the background, kind of waiting to pounce for any opportunity.
Is that my power naps?
Yeah, because you probably have a high sleep drive, because I know you are very busy and you don't oversleep, and you possibly undersleep.
Yeah.
So your sleep drive is possibly always quite a bit elevated, which means any chance for sleep to sneak in and have a go.
Yeah.
So you sit still, you relax.
Yeah.
It will, in you go, have a sleep. So there's, as well as our circadian drive, which is the melatonin, we have our sleep drive, and that's another kind of homeostasis.
Yeah.
It's a bit like our appetite. If we eat a lot, we're not hungry.
Yeah.
If we haven't eaten enough, we are hungry and ready for a meal. Same for sleep.
Yeah.
If you haven't had quite enough sleep, then you are always a little bit hungry for sleep.
Always ready for a nap.
That makes sense. Yeah. I always dream about going to sleep during the day, and I never do.
And was it really warm in your lecture as well?
It was really warm.
Yeah.
None of that helped. I was struggling. So on that then, in terms of sleep drive then, like how much sleep should we be aiming for? Like what's the most ideal? You know, again, a lot of the apps on the phones, they'll say you want so much deep sleep to feel refreshed. And what does all that mean? Does that actually mean anything or?
Okay, so there are guidelines that have been developed that help guide us in terms of the amount of sleep that we need, and the amount that we need changes with age. So young children need more hours of sleep than we do as teenagers and as adults. So there's the amount of sleep. And in fact, rather than recite that to you now, the Sleep Health Foundation has, if you just say how much sleep, if you Google how much sleep do I need, these guidelines will come up. But it's a range. It's not a hard number. So for adults, we don't need 8 hours sleep. For some people, even just 6 hours, between 6 to 7 a night might be okay. Some people, it might be 8 to 9 that's okay. But if it's less than 6 or maybe more than 9 or 10, that's a worry. Something's not quite right. We need to think about that. So it's the amount of sleep. And then you talked about REM sleep and deep sleep, and that's what is called sleep architecture, the stages of our sleep. And our bodies and our brains do different things at different stages of sleep. And each stage is important. But interestingly, when we look at the research into good sleep, there is more and more research telling us that if we look at our smartwatches, if we look at devices that tell us about our sleep, guess what happens? We sleep worse. So many experts say if you really care about good sleep, don't worry about it. Stop thinking about it. Because sleep is like a butterfly. If you chase it, it will fly away. You won't catch it. You have to play with sleep almost and say, I don't care. I don't care. You can come if you want to. I'm not interested. It doesn't bother me. And as soon as you tell yourself that, if everything else is right in terms of pain, environment, blah, blah, routines. But once everything else is right, the final trick is to say to sleep, you know what, I don't even care. And that's when sleep will go, okay, all right then, I'll come and see. I'll come and sit on your shoulder.
Just succumb to those physiological processes that are all playing out behind the scenes. And
we have to stop. It's not a catastrophe if we don't sleep. The minute we start to think about worrying, catastrophe, REM sleep, how much deep sleep I have. So now when I talk to people and they say, I have a tracker, I have a device, I think, no, let's not talk about that.
And don't worry about what happens at the point where you're trying to go to sleep, but maybe you can have a look at, say, your routine before the point where you're actually getting into your bed and making sure that your environment is well set up and, you know, that you're doing all of the things that the evidence tells us help to induce sleep.
And the sleep onset association can be very powerful. So the more we can develop, so the term which researchers that Veronique has worked with, they talk about fluffing the physiological pillow. So if we can get the environment just right for our physiology, including our thoughts, then it's like we've got our pillow just right for sleep.
Yeah.
And we would like that to be just right every night and through the night.
Yeah. So
I love it.
For our children with neurodisabilities and children who, struggle with sleep, and we know, those physiological changes are a little bit difficult to start to stimulate. How can we, I suppose, what are the take-home messages for clinicians or families working with these children to really optimize their sleep environment?
There are so many things, and again, it's so exciting. Think about, in fact, I know here at Healthy Strides you are looking at the impact of physical activity during the day on sleep. That's a really big one. So when we think about how the children we work with sleep, we think about 24 hours. We think about physical activity. How do we manage pain? How do we manage comfort? And I love the word comfort. Comfort means everything. It means emotional comfort. How do we feel calm and safe? It means thermal comfort, which Veronique has talked about. How is our environment just right for our sleep onset, for our body, for our sleep maintenance? We can think about our gut comfort, what's happening with our gut, even our skin. Have we got eczema or itchiness? Have we got allergies?
Wow.
All those, if we can maximise our body comfort, our emotional comfort, our environmental comfort, then we're pulling all that together as much as we can for the kids that we work with. And we know that every child is so different, but we also know that they change as well. So what we see today with this little child may be very different in even just tomorrow, but certainly as they grow and change and develop, of course, we need to constantly, just like we do with any children, adjust and adapt.
I love you, Sue.
I love you, Dana.
I love how you bring it in, and it's like I love how you share your excitement, and I love that the two of you guys as a duo, and you take the science and you put all of that together to make it so meaningful. And sleep is so important, so it changes lives. So when you put them together, you are actually improving quality of life for everyone, and I really love that. So thank you so much. But we're not done yet. We've got still one last segment to go. The Tell It to Ed segment. I know we haven't had it in a little while. Sometimes we're on and off with it. And we have had people writing in going, why is Ed not on the show? So let's go into it then. Let's head into Tell It to Ed. Ed, as you know, is our producer. He doesn't have a background in child health, but he has been listening on all of the conversations and he's been learning, and I'm sure he's very desperate to practice his French as well. I'm going to put that out there. He's giving me a really dirty look.
Quite right too.
I get it. It's fair. So Sue, in about 60 seconds or so, can you summarize the body of work that we have just talked about to someone who doesn't have a background in child health? And Ed will have a chance for a question, which either of you can answer. So I think the eyes are looking towards you, Sue.
Okay.
Here we go.
All right.
On the spot.
So at the risk of repeating myself, sleep is amazing. It is so important, as we know, for every aspect of our mental health, physical health, growth, development, function. Any function you think of, we can talk about how research tells us sleep is so important. What is so exciting and why I'm so excited to have my guru mentor, Veronique Bach, is that we know that thermoregulation is a really essential part of every aspect of sleep, about getting to sleep, staying asleep, but also about being awake and alert and functioning during the daytime. So there are circadian day-night patterns of sleep and wake, and there are circadian day-night patterns of body temperature. The other thing we know, thanks to our professors, it's not just about core body temperature, it's about the patterns of change in our skin temperature as well, because the two work so closely together. It's important. What else do we know? We know that for us to help the children we see, and even ourselves, anybody, have optimal sleep and comfort, we can look at their activities, what they do and when they do it. We can look at their environments. How can we manage the environment to be as perfect as possible for sleep and thermoregulation? And then, of course, we can look at all of us and children, our body structures and functions. So what kind of medications, what kind of health conditions do we look at as well to help manage that? It's a beautiful synchrony.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, Ed, over to you for a question.
My question kind of relates to like some of the work that gets done here at Healthy Strides. And there are obviously sessions where kids come in for their therapy. Is there some value to having a warmer sauna kind of atmosphere for kids to be more awake? Because I know sometimes kids come in and they're not as energetic as perhaps they might have been. They might have had a big week, or they might have gone to a previous therapy session and they're not as fully engaged as maybe they might have been. Is there some value to heating up? This sounds really silly, but this is a layman's approach. But is there some value to heating up a room to make kids more engaged? Is that a thing? Is that
More engaged, I don't know, but more awake, yes.
okay?
Yeah. It's just the reverse what we said about how to sleep. So during wakefulness, your body temperatures, internal body temperature is quite high and the skin temperatures are quite low. So if you help the skin temperatures to be low, this will increase wakefulness.
Yeah.
So, for example, we spoke about socks.
Yeah. Yes. We love socks.
But, for example, it has been studied in narcoleptic patients. They had problems to be awake during the day and to sleep during the night. Mm-hmm. And if you help them to have a lower skin temperatures during the day, you will help them to have a better vigilance during the day. So if they are more engaged, then that's another question.
That's out of our control.
That's fair enough.
So actually, Ed, in fact, it's the warm environment during the day. If we make the environment warmer, actually it may mean that the skin temperature will rise, which will make the child more sleepy. So in fact, during the day, it's the same that we need thermal neutral environment.
Okay.
Not too warm, not too cold, because children will just spend effort keeping their body warm.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they are too hot, it will make them more sleepy because they will get that vasodilation and they will get that core temperature drop and feel more sleepy if they're too warm.
Yeah.
So we just keep increasing the temperature?
No, the opposite.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not to a point where it's too cold.
Yes, exactly.
Because then you don't have the energy to expend on
Because then we will
activity.
vasoconstrict and we will work to stay thermoneutral, and we can't.
That's right.
Because all of the physiological effort is on trying to stay or trying to get the core temperature back up again.
Right.
Yeah.
But most of the children, when I'm working in therapy, if they are really sleepy and not engaged, it seems to me the problem is usually because the room is too hot or they have too many clothes on. We need to almost cool them down a little bit during the day. That seems to be the main difficulty.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good one. I mean, it matters is the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like we have to be intentional about the spaces that we're in because, like you said, we're affecting 24 hours and our routines are important.
Yeah.
Good question. Good question, Ed. Well, thank you so very much for joining us today. I've loved having both of you on.
Yeah.
You're so good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
putting up with the fact that we don't speak French and
Yes.
we speak English.
You should.
Sorry. I think it's a big thing. Whenever someone comes to the podcast and they speak another language, I'm always in awe. So
Yes.
it's
It could
amazing.
be-
Yeah.
It could be your first podcast in French.
Yes. Well, it could be groundbreaking, couldn't it?
Yeah.
But thank you for taking time out of your trip to Perth to spend this time with
Thanks
us
a lot.
today.
Yeah, thank you
was-
so very much.
It was nice.
And to all of our listeners, remember, if you want to get a hold of the run sheet notes from today and maybe some references to some of the articles that we did refer to today, just head over to our website, researchworks.net. And remember, there's a CPD form there that you can fill out as well if you want to keep this as part of a record of your PD requirements. But for now, we say thank you once again, and we'll talk to you all again next time. Bye.
Bye.